Hello and welcome to the Coaching Podcast, Coaching for Success in Sport and Business. Your host is Emma Doyle, the energy and high performance under pressure coach who is a world leader in unleashing human potential. Buckle up for this high octane session. Let them have it, coach.
G'day everybody and welcome to the Coaching Podcast. I am excited today to interview Adam Klein. Ironically, it's my brother-in-law's best friend is Adam Klein. Kleiny, shout out to Adam in Australia. That is not the Adam who I'm interviewing today. He's actually a professional certified coach, the managing director of New Ventures West, and he's a dedicated leader committed to creating a more just, sustainable, creative, and loving world. We definitely need more of that. He's also a podcast host himself. Of the podcast called Stepping In, and I'm excited to talk to him about his background, including running a professional certified coaching course as well. So, Adam, welcome to the show, and we'll kick it off. Do you prefer to text or call?
I prefer to call people. Unless it's a short, like just inform only kind of exchange, I'm much more, these days especially, I'll just pick up the phone because I find having that voice-to-voice contact is nice. And sometimes it's just honestly easier and a little bit more efficient.
I left a client of mine a voice message this morning. And I actually, when I left it, I said, I wonder if people even listen to these anymore. What's your take on that?
I've started doing that myself as well a little bit more because I receive them, especially for some of my colleagues and friends that are more around the world. And that seems to be more of a practice, especially I think in South America where I have some colleagues. So I receive it from them and I'm like, it's kind of nice hearing someone's voice. So I've started doing that as well. And I don't know if they listen to them or not, but I enjoy leaving them.
Well, talk to me about integral coach. I mean, what is an integral coach? Let's start there.
Yeah, that's a great question and one that has a variety of answers. So one way that I would talk about it is integral coaching is really an invitation for someone to discover and lean into their vocation, or sometimes we call it their purpose. So integral coaching wants to help people attune to and include all of themselves, their thinking world, their feeling world, their sensing world, the dimension of the soul, and have those things really work together in harmony so that they can bring themselves into the world fully.
So in the workplace context, let's say a manager or leader is finding that their team continues to bring all of themselves to work and all of their problems. What tip have you got there for a manager who is a coach?
Yeah, this is a helpful thing, right? Because what do we mean by bringing our whole selves? And does it mean we're just having cathartic experiences by sharing or sort of offloading things onto someone else? Another way of saying it is, how can we each access our own agency and power? So in the workplace, it might mean that, yes, you're bringing your whole self. And then in that, how does it make you step into more responsibility, more ownership? Another way to say it is like more self-leadership. So how are you in your life in a centered way and leading it for yourself? In a team context, how are you bringing forward contributions that support the team growing forward and support the health of the team? That doesn't mean leave parts of yourself out, but it means how can we bring it in a way that's life-giving for everybody? And in a team dynamic, how is it life-giving for the team? How is this going to support us all gelling together more, working together more efficiently, working together more with trusting relationships? So it's not I know because it can be interpreted, it's not a sort of a free ticket to just do whatever you want. It's actually a call into becoming more, to say it this way, more mature.
I've been listening to some of your podcasts. You've got this very mature, thoughtful voice. Have you always been like that? Like, take me back. Let's go to your backstory. How did you become a coach? And were you always, there's something centered about when you speak in listening to some of your podcasts in preparation for this interview that I was very impressed with. So
Yeah.
take me back to a young Adam,
A
and
young
how did you
Adam.
become a coach?
Yeah. So I think there's definitely been, as long as I can remember, an interest in like deeper questions and kind of getting to the existential things about life. And especially as a younger person, definitely combined with having fun and being crazy. But as I've grown, there's been this way that I'm trying to kind of continue to access both of these things, the sort of centered voice that you're mentioning, and not have it be so contained or restricted. So how to have both ends of the spectrum work together. But I can remember back when I was like going into college, wondering, what am I going to study? I don't really know what I want to do. Yes, I'm good at these things like in math and sciences. And I remember saying, well, what I really care about is helping people become who they are. And can I just do that? Now, of course, it was a question for myself as well. I think in hindsight, I realized part of what I was asking was, how do I become myself? Like, what do I really want to be doing in the world? And in my own question, I found a way of having that be of service to other people as well. So that's what led me into coaching ultimately. You know, back then I had no idea about coaching or what coaching was, and there was a very meandering path for me to get into coaching. But it's definitely been something in the background. Like, what makes us us? How do we feel free to be ourselves and not what society tells us to be, and feel more liberated while also being responsible, like we were talking about, and mature and taking care of not just ourselves, but the extended world. So that's been something, yeah, for a long time that I've been always interested in for whatever reason. You know, I'm not quite always sure.
So how can someone wake up from that little voice, you know, the one that says you could be more, or are you really living your vocation? And your voice says absolutely not. What's one step that people could take to uncover that?
You know, I've been in this question, especially as I've been talking to other people about like what it was like for them. And I think honestly, a helpful step is first acknowledging that that voice is there and giving it some breathing room. I find, especially in work with clients in the workplace, where that voice is there, but they don't want to give it time because it might be too disruptive to their life. It might mean they have to rearrange things, or there's too many demands on them. So they'd rather just rush through and take care of the immediate thing that has more clarity about it. It's easier. They know what to do. So honestly, a first step is acknowledging that it's there and then listening. And that's also partly my own story. Like for a long time, I felt like life had to make sense. Like I had to have a plan. So when I went to college for it was engineering. I went all the way through graduate school. And that was because in my mind, I had to do something that was pragmatic and practical, that could make money. And so that was my answer. It was sort of a thought out, engineered way of being in life, rather than sitting with this question that I mentioned to you earlier of like, how do I help people become who they are? That was so nebulous. I didn't know what to do with it. So I kind of just stuffed it aside. But it lingered and it lingered and it lingered. And finally I said, okay, I'll listen. And that's ultimately what had me pivot toward coaching. So that brave step in and of itself is a big one. Listening, making space.
Well, that's the reason I wrote my book, actually, What Makes a Great Coach. Listening came up as the first thing that one of the greatest players of all time told me makes a great coach. And that kicked off a whole podcast, this podcast, and the top 10 practices of which listening features very greatly. So in 1 to a maximum of 3 words, what would you say makes a great coach?
So it's a little bit of a different word for listening. The word I would use is attunement. So then I would expand it to say attunement to self and other.
Please expand.
Yeah, so the expansion part is attunement to me is like it's a kind of listening. So sometimes we hear listening and I'm listening to what you're saying, like the words that you're using and trying to make sense of the language. So to me, attunement is listening, not just at the words level, but like what emotions am I picking up on that are here? How do I feel in my body when I'm with this person? What happens? Do I feel more relaxed, more agitated, more playful, more courageous? So attuning to the different dimensions of a person. And then taking that in, and maybe I would say for coaching, it would be attunement and response. So attuning and then have the capacity to respond to your client in a way that's helpful. So that first part is taking in all the cues, said, unsaid, felt, sensed, and then having a generative response.
I love that. I haven't had that answer yet. So
yeah, what
there
do you
you
hear?
go.
I'm curious because you've been
There
in
you
this
go.
for a while. What do you hear in that?
What do I hear?
Yeah. You said
Uh,
you love it. I'm curious what for
uh,
you.
Well, what comes up for me is this ability to tap into the energy of the flow between the two people.
Right.
So when I hear that, it's, and I teach, I've got a workshop coming up next month on listening with empathy.
Mm,
And so this attunement is such a great word to describe what we're looking for with regards to the map is not the territory. What is really going on for the person? How do we tap into the energy of the, whether it be with a team, I'm often in front of a group of people, and
right.
that flow of energy as well. So, I know in listening to preparation for this interview, new ventures west certainly tap into the thinking, the feeling, and the sensing, and using the holistic approach to coaching,
Right.
which I think it sounds good on paper, but it's bloody hard. Like, it's
It
not
is.
easy to
No,
do,
it's not. Yes.
because it's much easier to coach based on, oh, what do you want to work on? Boom, I want to
Yeah.
work on this. All right, let's go do it. And especially my background as a high performance tennis coach. How'd you go on the weekend? Oh, my backhand sucked. All right, let's go fix your backhand. So shifting into this way of coaching, I think, it feels like sometimes I'm a new coach every day. So that's what came up for
Absolutely.
me. Yeah. So I want to talk about, and this is maybe selfishly, but I work with a lot with engineers
Mm,
and in the manufacturing space, and having them bring more of themselves just to a conversation is sometimes difficult. What would you say to somebody who's coaching someone who's very introverted, shy? They're there, but it takes them a while to sort of connect. What are some of the ways to do that on a level that's integral?
mm. Yeah, that's a wonderful question. And obviously, it depends on the person and what's going on. But to speak about it a little bit generally, I think one of the things that's powerful is recognizing how, like, I'll say it this way, how we're sitting or the shape that we're in our body influences like our thinking and our feeling. So sometimes it's helpful just to invite people into, what if you were to shift how you're sitting? Like if you were to sit up more a little bit and just change your posture. And now let's have a conversation. And then have them try on a different postures to have them feel the distinction between what they're thinking and what might come up for them to say. So that's one way of doing it. Another way is we're all going to stand up. We're all going to go on a walk, like shifting the like physical space or the dynamics helps rather than just trying to ask a different question. So it's like, to me, it's like, how do we work with the things that are in the background that are influencing our thinking and our expression? So things in the background are our posture, how we're sitting. Is there like good circulation and blood flow going on that's going to allow us to express ourselves? Especially for people who are in a work situation where maybe they're sitting a lot or they're in a routine, mechanized, like patterned way of living, then their body gets really patterned. So to have them have new insights, it's difficult because their mind is being patterned by how they're moving. So just a little bit of shift can often be a helpful way of allowing someone to access a different insight, talk about something new. The old sort of cliche is, it's like why good ideas come in the shower. It's because we're not in a routinized space. We're kind of just allowing our mind to wander and, oh, we have a new idea. So similar to that.
Well, that leads beautifully into when you do your ultra running, your Ironman triathlons. You get this deeper understanding the importance of the body and the integral nature of being human. First of all, hat off to you, as I said, off air. Very
Hat off, or like,
impressive.
what's wrong with you? One of the two.
But I think I couldn't think of anyone more qualified to speak about navigating resistance, the mind and the body connection. I mean, talk to me a little bit about your sporting background. What about when your mind says, I can't do this? Like you're on the you got the last 5Ks to go and your mind just goes, nah, I'm absolutely spent. So let's start from because this podcast obviously is about coaching for success in sport and business.
Sure.
So let's just go there for a minute. You as an athlete, especially with the Olympics around the corner, this will probably be an Olympic released episode. So what are your thoughts on that as it relates to the mind and the body connection?
So one of the things that I found helpful in my training, and especially in races when it gets difficult, is, and it's, to me, it feels counterintuitive. I don't know how it'll sound to you and to your listeners, but it's like relaxing into the resistance or relaxing into the discomfort. Not in a resigned kind of way where I'm collapsing or just giving up, but more like, oh, this is so hard. And sometimes trying to push through it just requires more energy and is depleting, rather than if I just, oh, this is really painful. Let me breathe into that pain in my hip. And then it starts to loosen up a little bit. And the pain starts to, it doesn't go away, but it subsides enough where I can keep going. And then eventually something else starts hurting and I forget about my hip. But to me, that's been really helpful, is learning how to relax in the middle of resistance or difficulty, rather than try to like hunker down and push through and get really rigid, because it requires actually more energy, I've found. So that's been a powerful thing for me of getting through some of those hurdles, those difficulties. Like I can remember a race 2 years ago where I was like almost ready to quit. I was like, I'm not going to finish this race. And I was like, well, let me just pause, take a breath, and just keep going a little bit here and see what happens. So in that, there's also a little bit of a commitment to just do one more thing. So take a breath, take a step, take a breath, take a step. So the other component I would say is breaking things down into smaller and smaller pieces and remembering, like, why am I doing this? What's my commitment? Oh yeah, I committed to doing something that was hard. And here's hard. It's here.
So a lot of people experience that in the workplace. What are your thoughts there for helping coaches who may be experiencing resistance?
Yeah, again, I think it's coming in and seeing not how do I like overcome the resistance or push through it, but how can I meet that resistance and have it relax? So what is another way of saying it is like, what is the resistance teaching me? The resistance is here. What is it resisting? What can I learn from it? And then it starts to relax. It's like, how do I befriend resistance? I had someone illustrate it to me this way, where they were like, okay, make a fist and then like really hold it and try to open it. And of course, you're like in tension with yourself. He's like, okay, now put your fist inside of your hand. And there's like a natural relaxation that happens in the fist. So meeting resistance that way, rather than head on, where rigidity meeting rigidity, it just reinforces rigidity until something snaps or you're like overpowered, which in the short term works in a team dynamic, but in the long term, it just really hinders performance when people are overpowered all the time.
What about a sports coach that's listening to this and thinks, Adam, nah, I need to be the motivational coach, and I'm the one who leads them in the battle, and that they need to push through it. And I'm not sure I agree. What do you say to that, sports coach?
So I'm not a huge sports psychologist, so there's probably, I think there's a lot of credence to that, where we're trying to rev someone up and get them to do something. And I know for me, it's much more powerful when I access my own inner motivation. And the more I can tap into that, that lasts a lot longer. There's a lot more power in it. And it goes the distance for me. Certainly credence to like, okay, I'm going to pump you up and we're going to go. And that's helpful. And it fizzles.
Not sustainable without the internal motivation. Do you think that this next generation are internally motivated? Do you think that that's died, or do you think it's still there?
I think people are wanting internal motivation and they're not quite sure where to find it or how to access it. But I think we've recognized that the old way of overpowering like works, but it has real limitations. There's this talk of like, oh, inner motivation, that sounds so nice and soft. And does that really work? How do we access it? So I think we're in this question period of what does that mean? Is it true? How do I access it? In the meantime, I have deadlines and things that are requiring me to get stuff done. To me, a space to really dig in and say, yeah, it does work if you're committed to it, but it requires commitment. And I think that's the piece that is often missing in our culture is commitment. Like, it's not fun. It's not easy. It requires attention. It requires focus. And commitment is something we do not just once. A commitment means I committed to that yesterday. I'm committing to it today. Tomorrow I will commit to it again. And that can play out over the long run. The way our attention gets hijacked so easily, commitments are get lost.
So if I'm a manager in charge of a team and they're collaborating and I'm setting up these environments to tap into that internal motivation, but there's no cohesion, that it's missing something. What are some thoughts and practical strategies that you could share to help coaches in that scenario?
I think one is I would come back to what I was just talking about, like commitment. What is our common commitment as a team? Yeah, yes, we have this project we're working on, but beyond specific projects, like what is our commitment to each other and what is our commitment to our work? To put something that is beyond the individual at the center and say, this is the commitment we've made. Are we going to live into our commitment? And to me, that allows people to then find a different kind of internal motivation. Like, no, I've committed to that. We've committed to that as a group. We're holding this commitment to do excellent work together and support each other.
Mm.
So now we're in the middle of a breakdown. Things aren't going how we thought they would go. Let's remind ourselves in this difficulty of our commitment to good work and our commitment to each other.
It helps us get out of bed, doesn't it?
It
One
can,
more
yeah.
time and
Yeah.
step up and face rather than run away from whatever's going on.
It also calls into question, is this something I want to be committed to? Maybe not. So that's
Maybe
a scary
not.
question. Yeah, that's a scary question.
Back to living your vocation.
Yeah.
So what's your purpose?
One way that I articulate it is letting go of everything that is not love and becoming all flame, bringing healing and light to others. So for me, it's a letting go of things that are inhibiting so that I can be a generative force for people in the world.
Beautiful. What disruptive idea do you have that you think is going to change the way we coach in 2030?
So what my answer to that would be, and it kind of goes back to something we were talking about earlier around integral coaching, that I think coaching requires a kind of person the coach to be, someone who can listen holistically and respond generatively. So that to me suggests it's something that's beyond a particular step. Like there isn't a way of writing those steps out. There isn't a particular methodology. It's like, how do I as a coach cultivate myself so that I can be a living, helpful response to my client? An analogy I like to use is, it's like, how do we become gardeners or midwives? Where we're paying attention to the garden, which is our clients, that has a natural process to it, And there's skillfulness on the gardener side of knowing what to do, when to add water, when to add fertilizer, when to bring more light, less light. So how do we attune ourselves to a natural process and be skillful about it? I think that's where coaching is heading, and it requires more of the coach in a way. Like how we live, how we cultivate ourselves as an instrument becomes more and more central.
Do you think anyone can become a coach?
I don't know if it's right for everyone to become a coach, to say it that way. I think we all have our different expressions in the world. And if we expand the word coach to be someone who like helps others and enables things to move forward, then yes. But sometimes it might be in the form of being a leader. It might be the form of being an artist. It might be the form of a teacher. So in a way, there's coaching going on, but you're not your profession is not a coach.
I know you use the tagline leader as coach. That's the other reason I got you on the show, because that's one of my workshops. I've run it 14 times this year.
Oh, great.
Leader as coach. So when you wrote that, I was like, I'm not sure you'd seen my stuff, but what do you mean by that then?
Yeah, well, it gets back to something you were bringing earlier around teams. So to me, leader as coach is how do I be a person in the workplace that empowers others to be more responsible, more in their power, full of more agency, able to take care of the whole more. So, and that to me also is included in like just how I am, how I show up in a meeting. So like when I walk in the room, if I'm a leader as coach, does my team all of a sudden feel more empowered, more capable? Because that's what we hope when our clients meet us. When a client sits in front of me, I hope they feel more relaxed, more capable, more able to express. So that for me, it's about both like what we're doing, leader as coach, but then also just how our team relates to us as a leader. It's that like being the wind under the wing.
Is that from one of your poems?
No, but it should be.
I liked that one. Published poet. Oh, that's fantastic. So with that, I know in your coach training that you teach the multiple intelligences, and as a leader, creating a safe space to allow people to have multiple intelligences. Do you want to share a little bit about your coach training and tapping into the different ways that you can coach somebody?
Sure. And it starts with that fundamental place of how do we enter into this way of being. That's what we call like how we show up. So supporting participants in our class to have the way of being that when they're with the client feels more seen, more capable, more able to express themselves, just as a starting place. So it's a year long, and the first quarter of the year is dedicated to the way I like to talk about it is like cultivating the soil. So the coach is the soil. Let's cultivate it. Let's make sure it has the right nutrients, the right water level, the right moisture level, so that about a quarter in, we can plant these seeds of skillful coaching. But if the soil isn't ready, if it's dry, it doesn't have the right nutrients, you can plant these seeds and they're just going to shrivel up and not really grow anything. So for us, it's important to have an environment, meaning the person that's ready to have these seeds of like listening and making requests and skillful response to clients, that those seeds have a place to find room to grow. And then at that point, it's kind of a dual track thing where you're working with your own sense of self, the soil, and then growing these skills as coaching and doing it all in a cohort, which is a big piece for us, that you're with the same group of people because there's so much learning that happens amongst each other and in groups. So that's how we go about it. It's really sort of a 3-track thing, like our own personal cultivation as a coach, learning competencies and skillful coaching, and doing it in a cohort in community.
Fantastic. So could you share, to round off this episode, potentially 3 top tips for coaches out there to respond generatively?
Well, I would go back to one of the things we talked about, like listening and attunement. First, start with, who is this person now? Like you used this lovely phrase earlier of like, the map isn't the territory. So when we encounter a client, who are they? Not who do we think they are? So that's the first. The second is, what's my own range of being able to respond? Like, am I really good at asking questions? Great. What about my capacity to say things clearly? Maybe that's something I need to work on. So noticing our own skillfulness, being able to listen, yes, and also respond. And then the third thing I would say is, who am I learning from as a coach? Like, our learning is never ending. That's one of the things I love about coaching. So what am I learning about coaching by being with this client? And then taking that to conversations with colleagues. So saying always open to the learning about coaching.
Well, it's been a garden episode, hasn't it, really, Adam? There's been lots of fertilized soil, so we can all plant our skillful seeds and grow, because who knows how what the garden's even going to look like sometimes.
Exactly. That's the thing, right?
I appreciate your time, your energy, and agency and power, and for us all to continue to live our vocation as leaders, as coaches, as managers. Adam, thank you so much for being on the Coaching Podcast.
It's been a real delight, Emma. Thank you for having me.
And thank you, everyone, for listening.
If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating review on your podcast listening device. And don't forget to tell a fellow coach about the show. The ball is in your court to take action and enjoy your coaching.